A family story from California. I was folding laundry in the converted garage. My room, the space my son and daughter-in-law had left for me. The dryer hummed, the faint smell of detergent clinging to the air. Upstairs, voices drifted, low at first, then sharper. Then my daughter-in-law, Brittany, appeared at the door and said, "We need space for the baby, Maggie. Maybe it's time you found your own place just like that." No kindness. A sentence dropped colder than ice water down my back. I froze, a half-folded towel in my hands. Did I hear her right? My own son's wife, telling me I don't belong? After all the nights I stayed up cooking, all the bills I quietly paid, after selling my own house to give them their start? I glanced at my son, Kevin. He stood beside her, my only child. He didn't speak. He only nodded, eyes fixed on the floorboards. That hurt worse than her words. "My name is Maggie Holloway. I'm 65 years old from Sacramento." And that was the moment I realized I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Subscribe if you like this kind of story. 6 months earlier, I had done something no financial advisor would ever recommend. I pulled $50,000 straight out of my retirement savings, money I had carefully built over 30 years as an accountant, and handed it over to Kevin. "Just until we get on our feet, Mom," he'd promised, gripping my hand across the worn wooden table of my old kitchen. 6 months, maybe less. Then we'll refinance, pay you back, and you won't have to worry again. I wanted to believe him. Of course I did. He was my only son. So I sold my modest 2-bedroom condo, packed up my memories, and moved into the small guest room of their brand new house in Sacramento. At first, I told myself it wasn't so bad. The house had 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, and even a little backyard with rose bushes that reminded me of the ones my late husband used to tend. Brittany had painted the nursery pale yellow already, even though the pregnancy was barely a whisper back then. I paid my share, more than my share, if we're being honest. The electric bill? I covered it. Groceries? I stocked the fridge every week, about $180 at Safeway. When the water heater broke that February, it was my credit card that covered the $1,200 repair. And yet, I was careful. I kept my little room tidy, folded the towels neatly in the linen closet, and never left a dish in the sink. I didn't want to be a burden. But slowly the atmosphere shifted. One night, as I was chopping onions for dinner, I overheard Brittany in the living room. Her voice was low but sharp, drifting through the half-open door. "Your mom means well, Kevin, but it's like having a roommate we never agreed to. It's not our space when she's here all the time." I froze, knife hovering above the cutting board. The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead, the smell of onions stinging my eyes, though it wasn't just the onions. Kevin mumbled something I couldn't catch. His voice was softer, unsure. Then silence. I remember setting the knife down gently, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand, and taking a deep breath. That was the first moment I realized my sacrifice had quietly turned from a gift into an obligation they resented. Sacramento in late summer. The heat baked the pavement until it shimmered. And in a quiet neighborhood, Kevin and Brittany's little bungalow sat with its sun-bleached roof and tired lawn. I lived in what they called the multi-purpose room, a converted space just off the garage. 9 by 11 feet, just enough for a fold-out bed and a small dresser. The walls still carried the faint scent of motor oil, a reminder that this used to be storage, not a bedroom. Kevin Holloway, my son, 35, hands rough from years as a mechanic but a heart too easily swayed, had once promised he'd always look out for me. His wife, Brittany, only 28, sharp-tongued, always chasing positive vibes and clean Instagram-worthy spaces, saw me differently. To her, I was part of the clutter. 6 months earlier, I had pulled $50,000 from my retirement account so they could put down a payment on this house. A modest bungalow, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a sagging porch, but a backyard wide enough for dreams. That night, the kitchen light glowed yellow as Kevin signed the papers. His hands trembled. "Just for a little while, Mom," he said, "until I get on my feet." I said nothing. Instead, I slid across the table a 2-page promissory note. Amount $50,000. Interest 0%. Terms repaid within 36 months or upon sale or refinance. In the meantime, 1 private room is reserved for me. Kevin's signature bled slightly on the paper, his palms damp with sweat. I tucked the document into a blue folder. Soft-hearted as I wasn't foolish. The next morning, Brittany pinned a grainy black and white sonogram picture to the fridge with a heart-shaped magnet. I stared at it longer than I meant to, my chest tightening. A baby, my grandchild. In that moment, all the numbers and contracts seemed to fade, but sacrifice has a way of being forgotten when it becomes routine. One Tuesday, the kitchen filled with the smell of roasted chicken I had just pulled from the oven. Brittany walked in, balancing a stack of receipts. She tapped her manicured nail against the bottom line. $247.38. Groceries, cleaning supplies, baby items. Could you add your card to the app, Maggie? It'll be easier that way. No need to bother Kevin with transfers. The wind outside rattled the chimes once, a soft metallic echo. I slid into the chair, opened my blue notebook, and carefully wrote, groceries, $120 per week, starting this month. Then I looked up and smiled. Sure, I'll handle it. Brittany smiled back, crisp and polite. No mention of the $50,000. No mention of gratitude, just silence. Morning light spilled across the kitchen tiles. I poured myself coffee and turned on the 6 o'clock news at low volume. Brittany walked in, wrapped in a thin kimono, a giant water bottle in her hand, the scent of orange essential oil trailing behind her. Mom, we're trying to keep positive energy in the house, she said, her eyes flicking to the TV. Negative news, bad vibes, it's not good for the baby. I lowered the volume. Positive energy without a single word of gratitude, I thought. I smiled. I'll use my headphones. Kevin passed through, tightening his shoelaces. Yeah, headphones would be good, Mom. His voice was neutral, as if he were choosing the path of least resistance. Brittany opened the cabinet, lifted the small teapot I used every morning, and dropped it into a plastic bin labeled declutter, minimal. The kitchen needs to breathe, she said. I looked at the empty space left behind on the counter. Yes, it could breathe now, but the air felt colder too. That evening, drizzle tapped against the window. The living room glowed under a single lamp. Brittany crouched by the bookshelf, organizing wicker baskets filled with prenatal guides, fabric sprays, and mindful mama pamphlets. I sat in the corner, knitting a tiny cream-colored sweater. Mom, she said, sweet but firm, sometimes mothers-in-law live in the past. Raising kids now is different. We're doing things modern, skin-to-skin, minimalist nursery, no food smells clinging to the curtains. I paused mid-stitch. I understand. I'll cook lighter meals. Kevin looked up from his phone on the sofa. Britt's got a point. Mom, don't fry fish at night anymore. The smell lasts until morning, I nodded. This from the boy who once waited by the stove for fried fish with garlic, begging for seconds. When did he forget the taste of his own childhood? The next afternoon, a laminated sheet appeared on my door. Privacy schedule, no entry. Master after 8 p.m. Downstairs, the fridge was now split into zones. Pantry, Brittany's. My jars of lentils and black tea were pushed to the bottom shelf. I was rinsing lettuce when Brittany came in, lifted the lid of my pot, and inhaled. Mom, could you eat earlier tonight and stay in your room? The baby's really sensitive to shared spaces right now. I turned off the tap. Shared spaces. I lived beside the garage. How much more private could I be? But I just dried my hands on the dish towel. All right, I'll head to my room early. Kevin leaned on the doorway, looking not at me, but at her. Thanks for cooperating, Mom. Brittany's under a lot of stress. I turned the silver wedding band on my finger. I understand. Pregnancy isn't easy, so my kindness was now called cooperation. That night, Kevin joined me on the back porch. The air smelled of wet wood. He kept his hands in his pockets, eyes on the fence. Mom, I know you're upset, but I need to support my wife. The doctor said minimize stress. We need boundaries. Boundaries, I repeated, staring at the faded fence. I'll adjust. Just give me a few months, okay? Once the baby comes, things will settle down. A few months. That's what he said when he signed the papers. Just for a little while. Promises light as dried leaves crumbling at the first touch. I didn't argue. I only asked, do you remember the last time you sat in the kitchen with me, eating your favorite meal? Kevin was silent. Somewhere nearby, a car door slammed. Rain ticked against the gutter. I'm just busy, Mom, he whispered. It's a lot. I nodded. I understand. But inside me, a thread snapped. Quietly, invisibly. Later, in my small room, I opened the blue notebook. This month's columns grew longer. Utilities, groceries, diapers, almond milk, Brittany's favorite. I slipped the ultrasound photo from the fridge into the pages, pressing it flat, as if it could mark a chapter I still hoped would be worth saving. I wondered when the distance had begun. Was it when Brittany packed away my teapot? Or earlier, when Kevin looked at the floor instead of at me, too afraid to meet my eyes? When had dinners lost the scent of fried fish and garlic, replaced by essential oils and rules? I closed the notebook. Just hold on a little longer, I told myself. Once the baby is here, maybe hearts will soften again. Maybe gratitude will grow back like grass after rain. Outside, the wind chime rattled once. I slid beneath my blanket, hearing Kevin's words echo, "I have to support my wife." And who, I wondered, was left to support me? The day the sonogram came home, the kitchen turned soft, sunlight on the fridge, a small heartbeat frozen in black and white under a heart-shaped magnet. "We did it," Brittany breathed. 12 weeks. Kevin kissed her temple. "We're gonna be parents." I touched the photo with 2 fingers. "She'll like lullabies," I said. "I still have a rocking chair in storage, oak, sturdy." It got me through Kevin's colic. Brittany slid a pastel mood board from her tote. Beiges, sage, clean lines. The marker squeaked as she circled minimalist nursery and drew a neat X over the rocking chair. "We're going modern." "No, vintage smells," she said, smiling. "All new energy for the baby." The kettle began to sing, one long, thin note. New energy, old love. By Saturday, the house had a floor plan taped to the fridge. Boxes lined the hall, donate, keep, nursery. The wind chime clinked once, and Brittany opened my closet like it belonged to her. "These sweaters can go," she said, tugging down the cream cardigan I'd been knitting to size. "We'll need space for diapers and the stroller." She held up my winter coat, black wool, sleeves shiny from decades of bus stops and late shifts. "This is heavy," she added, "and Sacramento barely gets cold." "It got me through 30 winters," I said. Kevin hovered, palms open. "Mom, we'll get you underbed storage." "It's just for a while, for a while." The phrase landed like a coin in a jar already full. Brittany folded my family photo into a bubble-wrap sleeve without looking at it. "We're streamlining," she said. "Cleaner space, calmer baby." I reached for the blue notebook on the closet shelf. She'd nudged it toward the donate box, mistaking the ledger for clutter. I slid it back under my arm, pages thick with bills, groceries, and the $50,000 in careful ink. The proof that love, here, had turned into bookkeeping. That night, the living room lost its chair. In its place, a birthing ball and a white diffuser pushing out cool eucalyptus. Brittany tested a playlist of ocean static. "The knitting needles click," she said, eyes on her phone. "It spikes my cortisol." Research. I closed the project bag and set it on the floor. "I'll stop for tonight." Kevin wrapped an arm around her. "Thanks, Mom." We need to minimize stimuli, I thought. Like a grandmother's hands, like a story told twice, like a chair that creaks because it remembers you. I carried the knitting to my room beside the garage. 9 by 11. On the refrigerator list, under nursery to do, someone had added a neat bullet: relocate Maggie's items. Not Mom. Maggie's items. I sat on the edge of the fold-out bed and ran a palm over the wool coat. I remembered the years it sheltered me, the night shifts, the rain that found the seam at my collarbone, the morning I walked home with grocery bags cutting into my fingers, and Kevin asleep on my shoulder when the bus never came. All the ways a woman learns to endure. In the hallway, tape ripped from a dispenser, long, decisive sounds. The house relabeled itself room by room until nothing here seemed to have my name on it. That was the bad news, folded tight inside the good. A baby on the way, and I was being slowly moved to the margins. Not shouted out, boxed out. Not with cruelty, worse, with wellness. It hit me then, clean and cold. In this new arrangement, I wasn't a grandmother in waiting. I was an obstacle to being organized. A placeholder until the nursery needed my square footage. I turned off the lamp and lay back, staring at the faint oil stain on the ceiling. When did Mom become Maggie? When did promises become policies? The wind chime answered with a single note small as a pin, and in that small sound I tasted the bitter edge of a truth I didn't want but couldn't unhear. Kindness, here, was no longer a gift. It had been recategorized like my sweaters, like my chair, under convenience. Sunday evening. The kitchen was still as if holding its breath. The diffuser puffed out a thin stream of eucalyptus mist, sharp and clinical, more like a hospital than a home. On the table, Brittany spread a sheet of paper, nursery layout V3, every corner neatly squared. Kevin stood at the sink, rinsing the last plate, water dripping tick, tick onto the mat. Brittany smoothed the edge of the paper with a fingernail, the tap sharp as a metronome. She looked at me with a smile too polished to be warm. "Mom, we need to talk." I set the dish towel aside and sat upright. Outside, the wind chime gave a single metallic note, a warning bell. Brittany slid across a stack of glossy brochures. Golden Willow Senior Living, independent suites from $1,200, along with printouts for studio apartments, Midtown, $1,150 to $1,300. We need the room for the baby. The doctor says a quiet space, no cooking smells, no old furniture. Would you be comfortable moving out for a while? I made a list of really nice places. Kevin said nothing. He set the plate on the rack, dried his hands on his shirt, and kept his eyes on the grout line between tiles. Then he nodded once, small and heavy, like swallowing a stone. I looked at the layout. The box, labeled crib, sat exactly where my fold-out bed stood. The dresser overlapped the shelf that held my blue ledger. The nursing chair claimed the corner window I opened every morning for air. Everything had a place except me. Brittany softened her tone, sprinkling sugar over the cut. "Please don't take it the wrong way. This is about the baby's safety, fresh energy, privacy. You'll be more comfortable too, without us disturbing you." Kevin was still polishing the counter where I had just wiped, circling. "You can scrub it spotless, son, but memory still stains," I thought. Then Brittany reached into her tote and pulled out a wooden key holder with 3 hooks. She unfastened the one marked in her handwriting. "Maggie, side door." She placed it on the table and slid it toward me. "For baby proofing, we'll keep the main keys. You can use this one, the side entrance." Safer that way, the kitchen seemed to widen, like a wall in my chest had been torn down. A cold, bright emptiness. I didn't raise my voice. I lifted the key, cool metal pressing into my palm. I smiled, steady. "All right. I'll make arrangements." Time stalled, then lurched forward again. Brittany exhaled. Kevin muttered something hollow. "Thanks for understanding, Mom." I nodded. "I understand," I repeated inside my skull. I understood that the sonogram photo on the fridge mattered more than the teapot I'd lost. I understood that Kevin's promise, just for a little while, had expired, unacknowledged. I understood that in the house I'd given $50,000 to secure, I was now the one being shown the door. A breeze slipped under the door frame, lifting the edge of the golden willow flyer. Its corner caught the light, a smear of gold across cheap ink. I thought of the winters I'd braved in my black wool coat. Bus stops at midnight, grocery bags biting into my hands, Kevin asleep on my shoulder. Years I'd taken steps backward without complaint. But this wasn't a step back. This was a shove. I gathered what still bore my name. The blue ledger, the worn coat, the half-knit sweater meant for the baby not yet born. A thought rose in my chest, clear as if someone else had spoken it for me. My daughter-in-law got pregnant and demanded I move out. And in that moment, I saw the truth unmasked. There are demands dressed as safety, orders wrapped in wellness, but at their core, they are just ways to push a person out of the borders of a family. And there are men's nods, small, silent, that carry enough weight to slide a mother off the threshold of her own child's home. I looked at Kevin. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. When did Mom become Maggie scribbled on a tag? When did fried fish and garlic turn into bad stimuli? When did the kitchen stop having room for knitting needles, but overflow with playlists of ocean waves? The wind chime struck once more. I folded the flyer and slipped it into my bag with the key. When I turned away, I caught my reflection in the fridge door. My lips moved before I knew it. I'll go, but I won't go empty-handed. And for the first time, the kitchen was honestly silent. The suitcase sat half open on the fold-out bed. Beside it, my blue ledger, my black wool coat, shiny at the elbows, draped across the chair like an old friend waiting to be dismissed. I ran my hand over the fabric and the past rose up, sharper than the present. I used to spend my days in a cubicle at Pacific Mutual Insurance. 30 years, tapping numbers into a computer that groaned like it was older than I was. Salary, $2,150 a month after taxes. The mortgage alone was $950. The rest disappeared into gas, groceries, and daycare. Lunch was often a peanut butter sandwich eaten at my desk, crumbs caught between the spacebar and the calculator tape. At night, when the office lights flicked off one by one, I stayed late, squinting at columns of figures. My eyes burned, but I told myself, work hard enough, and Kevin will never feel the weight of this struggle. Now, years later, he stood in my kitchen and nodded while his wife pushed me out. "So much for gratitude," a small voice whispered. "It evaporates faster than coffee steam." Kevin was only 4 when his father left. That winter was cruel, rain that slapped sideways, bus stops with no shelter. One night, after my shift ended early, I found Kevin asleep on the bench, his head heavy on my shoulder. I wrapped him in my coat and hummed to keep him from shivering. In my purse, $12.75. Enough for a quart of milk and a loaf of bread. Not enough for me. I skipped dinner that night, letting my stomach pinch itself hollow, watching Kevin drink the last drop of milk with a white mustache across his upper lip. I thought then, if my boy is full, I can be empty. That's what mothers do. Tonight that memory stung, because the same boy, grown, bearded, with tired eyes, had just looked at the floor and let me go hungry in another way. I once had a home of my own. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. Paint peeling, yes, but walls that held laughter. A crooked apple tree in the backyard, branches scarred by decades of storms. The dining table scarred too, knife marks from science projects, crayon doodles Kevin swore weren't his. I sold it. $50,000 into Kevin's down payment. I told myself, it's not a loss, it's an investment in family. But now, in this smaller house, the nursery blueprint had erased me. My room was already redrawn into a crib and a dresser. My sacrifices redrawn into clutter. I sat back, coat still under my hand. The voice in my head wavered between love and anger. If I hadn't sold that house, I'd still have a roof of my own. But would Kevin have learned to stand on his own legs? Or did my help make him weaker, softer, willing to nod me away when it suited him? My chest tightened. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. And I've been surrendering all my life. A car honked faintly outside. The world kept moving, indifferent. I closed the ledger, folded the coat into the suitcase, and whispered into the dim room, "I've been stepping back my whole life so my son could step forward. Maybe now, it's time to stop." The wind chime outside struck once, thin and clear. This time it sounded less like a warning, more like an agreement. The apartment was small, but it was mine. A 1-bedroom, 5th floor, just above a bakery on J Street, where the smell of warm bread drifted through the window each morning. Rent, $1,275 a month. The walls were bare, the carpet threadbare, but for the first time in months I closed a door and knew no one could tell me when to open it again. I unpacked slowly. The blue ledger went onto the narrow desk by the window. I put my wool coat in the single closet. The suitcase emptied slid under the bed with a sigh. For a moment I sat on the arm of the couch, listening to the city hum. So this is what freedom costs. Less space, but more breath. 2 days later, I walked into the office of Helen Morris, Esk, my old attorney, the one who helped with my first mortgage back in 1989. The carpet in her office was new, but the woman behind the desk was the same. Sharp bob of gray hair, glasses low on her nose, a fountain pen that looked like it could pierce steel. "Maggie Holloway," she said, standing to hug me. "It's been years." "What brings you in?" I set the blue ledger on her desk and flipped to the promissory note, Kevin's signature smudged at the bottom. "I need advice." 6 months ago, I loaned my son $50,000. No interest, just the promise of repayment on sale or refinance. My name is still on the co-borrower line of the mortgage. Helen adjusted her glasses, scanning. "You were generous." "Too generous. But yes, your name gives you standing. Legally, you still have rights over that property." I folded my hands in my lap. "What kind of rights?" "Recovery of your contribution. Potential lien. If they sell, you're entitled to your share back. And if they don't..." She tapped the page with her pen. "You could force action. It's leverage, Maggie. And leverage is power. The word lingered, strange and heavy. For years, I thought survival meant silence, eating the smaller portion, taking the later bus, smiling when I wanted to scream. But now, silence had pushed me out of my own son's house. I leaned back, heart steady as steel. Then let's talk about using that leverage. Helen's eyebrow arched, half surprised, half pleased. That sounds like a woman who's done being invisible. I smiled faintly. I've been invisible long enough. Outside, the city clattered with traffic and sirens, but inside the air felt still, charged. This wasn't revenge for bitterness' sake. This was the simple act of refusing to vanish. And if Kevin and Brittany thought they had swept me out with the clutter, they were about to learn what happens when the clutter fights back. The apartment was quiet, but not lonely. Each morning, the scent of bread from the bakery downstairs drifted up through the thin walls, reminding me that life, even in small spaces, could still be warm. It was Helen, my attorney, who first suggested it. You've spent 30 years balancing numbers, Maggie. Why not put that to use? The banks are desperate for consultants who understand debt recovery, and so I walked into the downtown branch of River City Credit Union, one Tuesday morning, blue folder in hand, nerves rattling like coins in a tin. The manager shook my hand. Part-time, flexible hours. You'll review delinquent accounts, help clients restructure payments, guide them through budgets. He smiled. We could use someone with your experience. Experience, not age. For once, the word fit me like a well-tailored coat. By the second week, I had my own desk, not a cubicle, just a small space near the window, sunlight pooling across the monitor. I stared at the Excel sheet, blinking back at me, unfamiliar as a foreign alphabet. My fingers hovered, unsure. Need help? The voice came from over my shoulder. Lena, 24. Quick smile, nails painted sky blue. She pulled up a chair without waiting. See here? She clicked. Formulas do the math for you. Saves time, I frowned. In my day, we checked figures twice, 3 times. And now, she grinned, you can check them 1,000 times in a second. Trust me, Maggie, you'll love it, I practiced. Slowly at first, clumsy, but each time the green checkmark popped up, a small thrill lit inside me. I wasn't obsolete, just unupdated. Lena leaned back. See? You've still got it. Still got it. The words landed like a balm. That evening, I walked home under the neon flicker of J Street, bag of fresh rolls in hand. I thought about the day, the spreadsheet balanced, the client who left with a budget plan and tears in her eyes, the manager who said, you explain things in a way people understand. That's rare. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden or a shadow. I felt useful. Not because I washed dishes or paid bills in silence, but because my mind, my voice, my patience still mattered. I unlocked the apartment door and the wool coat hung by the entry. For once, I didn't see it as a relic. I saw it as proof. Proof I'd carried weight before and I could carry it again. I set the rolls on the counter, poured tea, and whispered to the empty room, I'm not done. Not yet. And the silence didn't echo back loneliness. It echoed strength. The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, folded neatly inside a white envelope stamped with the blue crest of River City Credit Union. Brittany was the one who opened it. She stood in the kitchen, baby bump framed by the window, sunlight spilling across the counter. Her nails slid under the flap, casual, until the words inside made her grip falter. Notice of delinquency, co-borrower, action required. Her eyes moved faster now. Outstanding balance. Risk of lien. Demand for repayment or liquidation. The paper trembled between her fingers. Kevin, she called, voice sharp, high. He came in, wiping grease from his hands, still in his work coveralls. She shoved the letter at him. He read once, then again, as if a second pass might change the words. His Adam's apple bobbed hard. She wouldn't, he muttered. But she had. Within the hour, Brittany's phone filled with unanswered calls and texts. Maggie, we need to talk. You can't do this, not now. Please think about the baby. The read receipts stayed gray. Silence where once I had filled the gaps with groceries, with bills, with casseroles cooling on their counter. Kevin tried too. His thumb hovered over the screen longer, his words less sharp. Mom, please pick up. We can work this out. But silence stretched, tight as a pulled thread. By Friday, he drove downtown, past the bakery where the scent of sourdough drifted into the street. He parked crooked outside the small apartment building, heart thumping. He climbed the narrow stairwell, each creak of the wooden steps louder than the last. Through the open courtyard window, he heard water trickling. There I was, Maggie Holloway, 65, in a straw sun hat, watering a line of geraniums on my balcony. The hose hissed softly, beads of water scattering rainbow in the sunlight. My shoulders were relaxed, my lips humming a tune. Kevin froze on the landing. I looked peaceful. I looked free. Not the bent figure in his garage, not the silent maid at his table. He stood there, clutching the letter like a lifeline, sweat beading under his collar. For the first time, he realized the imbalance. In my stillness, I had the power. In his panic, he had none. I turned then, saw him. For a moment, our eyes met. His, frantic, mine, steady. I bent, shut off the hose, shook the water from my hands, and went back inside. The geraniums kept dripping, their leaves jeweled with sunlight. Kevin remained on the landing, the letter damp in his grip, knowing something irreversible had shifted. The woman he thought could be dismissed had become the woman he could no longer ignore. Kevin stands at the door, cap in hand, grease shadowing his knuckles. "Mom, can we talk?" "Come in," I say, turning the flame down under the kettle. "Sit." He stays standing. "Please, can you call the bank?" "Tell them it was a mistake. She's not sleeping. This letter, this lien thing, it's too much." He's asking me to mop up a mess he made with my cloth again. "I didn't send a mistake, Kevin," I answer. I asserted a right. He swallows. "Just stop it. For the baby's sake." The baby? Always the baby, used like a key to every lock. I pull out a chair. For the baby's sake, the adults have to act like adults. "Sit, son." He lowers himself, shoulders tight, eyes flicking to the blue ledger as if it might bite. He exhales through his nose. "You turned a bank against your own family." "The bank is a calculator, not a cousin," I say. "It doesn't take sides." "It reads contracts." "Contracts?" His voice hardens. "You mean that paper you made me sign when we were desperate?" "That paper," I say, sliding the folder toward him, "is a promissory note for $50,000. 0% interest. 36 months or upon sale or refinance. Your signature is here. Smudged, but yours." He doesn't touch it. "We're drowning, Mom." "You're pushing our heads under. You're standing in water I warned you about." I say. "I'm stepping out of it." He jolts forward, voice pitching up. "So you want us to sell the house? Is that it? You want us homeless with a newborn? Is this revenge?" The kettle finds its whistle. I switch it off before the sound can swell. Here it is, the old trick. Name your consequences as my cruelty. "Revenge," I repeat softly, letting the word cool. "No. Accountability." He laughs once, humorless. "Call it whatever makes you feel noble. You set this in motion. You lawyered up. You filed notices. And you," I say, boxed up my life and labeled it Relocate Maggie's Items. I place a second page on the table, a yellow sticky note, old, flattened. The handwriting is his, dated the night they closed on the house. "Just for a little while, Mom. I'll take care of you. Kay." He goes still. "You wrote that," I say. "You looked me in the eye. Then you looked at the floor and nodded me out of your home." His jaw jumps. "Brittany's pregnant. She needs space, a calm environment. The doctor does not prescribe evicting grandmothers." I cut in, voice even. "That was your decision." Your silence. He stands up so fast, the chair scrapes. "You're making me the villain." "I'm doing my best." I meet his glare. "Your best can include a spine." For a beat, the room holds its breath. He sags back into the chair, anger collapsing into something smaller. Why did it come to this? "Because," I say, calm returning like tide, "Brittany craves control and you avoid conflict. Because I taught you generosity but forgot to teach you boundaries. Because I sold my house and told myself it was love, when part of it was fear you'd fall without a net." He stares at the sticky note. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I say. "Hurt doesn't require intent, only impact." He rubs his forehead. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to keep your word." I tap the promissory note. "You have 3 options. Repay the $50,000, refinance, or sell. All 3 keep a roof over your child. None require my erasure. And if we can't, right now?" His voice is small. Then you pick the honest path and walk it fast, I say. Ask Brittany's parents to help. Call your lender. Cut expenses you should never have carried. But don't put your hand in my pocket and call it family. He flinches. You think I'm a bad son? I think you're a good man with a bad habit, I answer. You nod when you should speak. You delegate your conscience to the nearest comfort. That's how a mother becomes Maggie on a key tag, and a promissory note becomes revenge. He looks at me then, really looks. How do I fix this with you? I turn the sticky note toward him, the ink faded but legible. Start by telling the truth out loud, to yourself, to your wife, to me. He swallows. I promise to take care of you. And I promise to take care of myself if you didn't, I say, sliding both papers into his hands. This is the map, I tap the contract, and this is the mirror. I tap the note. One shows you what to do, the other shows you who you were. Choose who you'll be. He closes his fingers around the pages. The city hums through the open window. Downstairs someone laughs. Life, indifferent but available. I'll talk to Brittany, he says, and the bank. Good, I say, standing, and talk to the man in your mirror. He's the only one who can end this kindly. He nods once the way he did in the kitchen, only this time he meets my eyes. Then he leaves, steps heavy on the stairs. I pour the hot water over tea leaves, watch them bloom. On the table, a circle of condensation cools where his cup could have been. One day, I tell myself, maybe that circle will be filled with respect instead of expectation. The wind, slipping through the window screen, lifts the corner of a bakery bag. It settles, quiet, steady, like a lesson finally landing. The wind chime on the balcony rang a thin note. I opened the door. Frank Morrison, 66, tall but stooped a little now, the posture of a man who'd spent decades in city council offices, living by rules and procedure. Beside him stood Linda Morrison, 64, soft-featured, a former elementary school secretary who'd always believed kindness could smooth sharp edges. They were my in-laws, the parents of Brittany. The last time I'd seen them was at Kevin's wedding, all polite hugs and let us know if you need anything. Today they came in cautiously, Frank holding a paper-wrapped apple pie, Linda clutching her handbag as if it were a fragile decision. Hello, Maggie, Linda smiled strained. We wanted to talk, to keep peace in the family peace. What they really meant was, please back down just once more. But I had been backing down my entire life. Let me make tea, I said, stepping aside. The kettle began to hum. My little table barely had space for 3 cups. Linda began, her voice light but hurried. Brittany's been crying constantly. She says you're a bit too rigid. If you could just soften a little, everything would settle. The baby's almost here. Frank cleared his throat, his tone still that practiced calm of a bureaucrat. We came to find harmony. As for the bank, is there any way you could withdraw the complaint? Brittany says it's all just a misunderstanding. I set the blue ledger on the table. I wish it were a misunderstanding. But here is the loan agreement, $50,000, 0% interest, due in 36 months or upon sale or refinance. Here are the utility bills I covered for 6 months, $178 electric, $62 water, and here, groceries, $120 a week. Not to boast, only to put the facts on the table. Linda's eyes moved down the lines, her finger tracing each number as if relearning multiplication tables. I didn't realize it was like this. Of course she didn't. No one ever asked. My silence was mistaken for emptiness. Frank set the pie aside, bracing his hands on his knees like a man about to hear something heavy. Brittany told us you bring negative energy. That you don't fit their minimalist lifestyle. I thought it was just a generation gap negative. Such an easy stamp to press on someone else instead of facing your own cracks. I pulled out an old yellow sticky note, laid it by his cup. Just for a little while, Mom. I'll take care of you. Kay. The night they signed for the house, my son wrote this. A week later, my door carried a no-entry schedule. And this? I placed down the wooden key tag marked in Brittany's neat hand. Maggie, side door. The metal clinked against the wood, a sound of new borders being drawn. They said it was for baby-proofing. To me it was, you use the side door now. The room stilled. Linda's hand tightened on her bag strap, her voice low. Brittany, she's anxious. Pregnancy makes her cling to control. She thinks tidiness equals safety. I was anxious once too. Rain lashing sideways, my 4-year-old asleep at the bus stop, only $12.75 in my purse. I was terrified, but I never posted a no-entry sign on my heart. Frank stared at the tag, his shoulders stiff. She actually called you a negative person? I kept my tone even. Her words were old energy, as if family was outdated. I understand change. What I don't understand is why love gets boxed up with the junk to be cleared. Linda shifted uncomfortably, her voice soft. I'll tell my daughter she needs to apologize. At least. For that word, Frank nodded. And I'll tell my son-in-law a man doesn't hide behind his wife and call it support. Now I see why you went to the bank. Not to punish, but to draw a fair line. I managed a faint smile. Everyone needs boundaries. To protect others and to protect themselves, Linda touched my hand gently, her eyes sincere. Thank you for showing us the truth. Loud voices drown out truth. I'd rather let numbers and memories speak. Frank paused at the door, setting the pie back on the table. This isn't a bribe. It's a gesture to say, we acknowledge. When the door closed, the smell of apple and cinnamon mingled with the steam of tea. I sat back, gathering the papers. In my chest, a heavy cord slackened. Not every in-law visit is about defending their child. Some are about relearning from scratch what it means to be decent, what it means to be fair. The sale went through in late spring. Kevin and Brittany signed the papers with tight jaws and tired eyes. The house, once their triumph, was gone. But so was the debt. From the proceeds, they repaid me my $50,000 down to the last dollar. They moved into a smaller home across town. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. Modest, but theirs. No oversized mortgage, no illusions. Just enough space to breathe without borrowing someone else's air. 6 months passed. My apartment above the bakery had grown comfortable. The scent of bread still woke me each morning. My balcony flowers bloomed brighter than I expected, and the work at the credit union gave my days rhythm and purpose. Then one Saturday afternoon, the knock came. Kevin stood there with Brittany beside him, arms cradling a tiny bundle swaddled in pink. Their faces looked older, thinner, but softer too. Mom, Kevin said quietly, we'd like you to meet her. Brittany shifted the blanket, revealing a baby with wide, curious eyes. This is Dorothy Grace, she said. We gave her your middle name. For a moment I couldn't speak. The air felt heavy and light all at once. I reached out and the baby's tiny fingers curled around mine. Her skin was warm, fragile, and yet she gripped as if she'd never let go. Later, in my living room, while the baby dozed in her carrier, Kevin poured tea and Brittany watched in silence. I spoke, not to scold, not to warn, just to tell the truth. I've learned something, I said. Family isn't about how much you give until you're empty. It's about how much respect you require while you give. For too long, I forgot that second part. And so did you. Kevin bowed his head. Brittany wiped her eyes. I looked at little Dorothy breathing softly and felt a circle close. Not the old one, where love meant sacrifice without limits, but a new one. A circle with boundaries, respect, and still love at its center. Now, when I hold my granddaughter, I don't feel like clutter to be boxed away. I feel like what I always was. A mother, a grandmother, a woman who still matters. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply refusing to be erased. When I look back, there are moments that still echo like thunder. The night my daughter-in-law slid the key tag across the table. Maggie, side door. The morning Kevin lowered his eyes and nodded, silent, as if my life could be boxed up and labeled relocate. The day I unfolded the blue ledger in front of them and asked them to face the truth. Those were the breaking points, and they became my turning points. For too long, I believed love meant just for a little while, Mom. I'll take care of you. I believed sacrifice was the price of belonging. I let myself be treated as if age made me useless, as if motherhood had expired. But life has taught me this. No one has the right to erase you. Not family, not age, not circumstance. At 65, I found freedom in a 1-bedroom apartment, flowers on a balcony, and a part-time job that reminded me my mind still has worth. I found strength not in shouting, but in placing contracts, receipts, and truth on the table for all to see. And when my granddaughter's hand closed around my finger, I knew the circle hadn't ended. It had been redrawn, wider, stronger, more honest. This is what I want anyone listening to know. Even if betrayal has cut you, even if your sacrifices have been forgotten, even if your own children mistake silence for weakness, you are not disposable. Stand up. Claim your space. Protect your boundaries. Because fairness is not a favor, it is a right. I am Maggie Holloway, a mother, a grandmother, a woman who refused to vanish. And if there's one truth my story proves, it's this. Sometimes the most powerful act of love is refusing to let yourself be treated as less. So, that's how the story ends. If this made you think, or if you've lived through something similar, share your thoughts in the comments. Our channel is a space for sharing tales of the elderly and family revenge stories from people who have weathered life's storms. Subscribe for more, because sometimes the deepest form of revenge is simply living on your own terms.